Like you're talking Pentecostal was like borderline like demon possession is what I was.
Oh, they used to rag on it so bad,
Yes.
and then of course, but they ragged on everybody.
Yes.
They ragged on how many times? And the thing was, I don't think any of us knew what they were really talking about. How many times we hear them talking about that's Calvinism? I'm like, oh, that must be bad. and then when I was a kid, and I would hear this, and then I got a little older and met somebody like I'm a Calvinist. I'm like, did you say Nazi? It's like I had like the same reaction. I've heard about you guys. Yeah,
I never thought I'd see one in person.
Yeah, I know.
I've read about you in my history book.
3, 2, 1.
Get ready, set, go.
Who's gonna say it? We got so many people.
This thing on.
There it is.
There we go.
That's the voice of John Sparks, whom you haven't heard for how long?
No. The sensual fireman.
Oh, yeah.
You gotta get it right.
Called up. Yes. We've got a bit of a packed house. I tell you, I don't think we've ever had this many people sitting around the table
Me back
one
on
time.
the show, and I mean, everybody just comes in wants to be part of it.
Well, yeah. I mean, you're in high demand. Yeah, we got John. We got Missy. We got Kane and Ryan, Indiana, and I heard something about somebody sitting in on the show out there. Is that right?
Yes, my mother-in-law.
Your mother-in-law. Well, Kane, you're going to have to really behave this evening.
I know.
Be
Why
on
you
the
think I've been
best
quiet
behavior.
all this time?
Yeah, you have been really, really quiet.
Aw.
Oh, man.
Come on,
She
Kane,
knows
hit us
what
with-
you're really like. You can't fake it.
Hit us with some of your humor. Come on.
Yeah. And then we got my mom sitting in on this end over here. So we got the moms there.
Mom, Dad.
Mom, Dad.
They are keeping track of us here.
They're watching, making sure we behave.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, Phil's going to have to behave now.
This conversation will not be getting out of hand.
You may hear cheering in the background. That's just our mom.
Yes.
We have a studio audience.
That's my baby.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I guess technically we did have a studio audience that day, Miss, that your dad was in here.
That is true.
Because then he started like grabbing the microphone. And,
Yeah, he couldn't hold his tongue though. He ended up becoming part of the show.
That's
Yeah.
my dad, though. My dad cannot keep quiet. And then you wonder why
Yeah.
I am the way I am.
he started making these really, really corny dad jokes. And
Yeah,
I-
just-
Oh,
I
ever
was-
dad.
I'm not going to give in to that as the day approaches that I'm enter fatherhood here.
you know what? I'm waiting on to see if you'll turn into the basic dad about your yard. Have to mow it every Monday.
You know that's not going to happen. You know there's not a chance at all that's going to happen.
Maybe once every other week.
Maybe if you're lucky.
The baby will be out on the zero turn operating.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Yeah,
Phil,
that's-
put that baby to work.
That's my plans.
Give him a cowboy hat. He'd be down there just trying to make that thing do the wheelies.
All right, we got a guest this week, and this is the first guest we've had in a while too, and I've been looking forward to this. We have is it BereanHoliness.com, Natalie?
Yes, that is what it is.
So from BereanHoliness.com, we got Natalie Edmonson on the show today, and I'm really, really looking forward to this conversation. In fact, I listened to. So you'd said that the last time, there was a podcast you was on just about a week or so ago, and that was the first time you was on one?
I was on the Deliberating Pastors podcast. That was in October. And then a week ago, I recorded an episode with someone else, but that hasn't been released yet.
So yeah, I heard you on the on that other podcast. I really enjoyed the conversation, and really heard you really dig into some of the stuff there. But of course, this is kind of a pet project or topic of a lot of ours. We sit around and usually Canaan, whether it's us sitting with you or if I'm sitting over at Mom's or whatever, usually the topic strays onto this kind of a topic at some point or
This
other
is
during the
something we
weekend.
know very well about. Just we all relate to it, and it's something we've either grown in or shied away from. So
I guess give a little background. So Missy was you were a missionary's kid.
yes, my parents were missionaries and pastors of the Bible Missionary Church. I don't know if you've ever heard of that. I know Canaan has and his wife know about it, but And then they came back to the States after they were missionaries in Papua New Guinea and Africa. And then after that, they settled down in Pennsylvania, and that's when I met my husband, and my dad has since left the church there. Actually,
Yeah, but you were a preacher's kid, missionary
Yes.
kid. I think the only person that wasn't a preacher's kid was Mariah, right?
Yeah.
And she is the most
The
scarred
odd
of us
one
all.
out. How about that?
No, I'm kidding.
So
I'm the least scarred of all of you.
That is a good point.
So anyways, to say all that to kind of let you know, we've been around it, and so that's why it really a topic of high interest to us.
Very neat. I'm still learning how the conservative holiness movement works and looks, and how the standards and the preaching teaching is on that side of the holiness movement. Because on ours, it was, of course, we have all the Pentecostalism, which is really fun.
Yeah.
Added to the holiness. But what's interesting is that while I was very involved in the Holiness Pentecostal ministry, I mean, for the first 20 years of my life, 18 at least, I never heard of conservative holiness.
Mhm.
I had no idea that movement existed. We never fellowshipped it that I'm aware of. And of course, Pentecostalism was that was the only way to go.
Yeah.
So when I found out about conservative holiness in Bible school, I was just shocked that there was a movement so much bigger than ours and so similar that I never heard of. And I just heard so many good things about the conservative holiness side.
Oh,
From
boy.
the get-go.
Who was you talking to?
Aw.
No, I'm just joking.
I was pretty jealous. I was ready to pack my bags and go over there. Well, I heard like how intellectual you guys were and how much better your schools were, and I don't know what was rumor and what wasn't. I just know I was jealous at the time.
We're a very intellectual bunch.
I'm smart.
Yeah. So go ahead. So you grew up in how do they say it? Pentecostalism? Is that the term for it?
I'm not sure.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, that's a big term.
That is a big term. I'm not used to saying terms like that.
Pentecostalism.
Your head about exploded on that one.
So you grew up in that, and it was similar, but you all didn't really cross lines that much, is what you're saying.
Yeah, we didn't fellowship with anyone who wasn't part of our strict holiness, independent Pentecostal. I'm racking my brain because I know someone's going to listen to this episode and correct me, but yeah, I can't. I'm really trying to think of anyone else we fellowship, but
Listen, you don't have to worry about
no.
that. Nobody listens to this show.
False.
No, we know
so-
it's actually it sounds familiar. Just
Yes,
that part right there.
Just that part. I
Yeah, it
recognize. We did have some friends who were Pentecostal, but they were like very conservative. My parents were not necessarily the ones that kind of ruled everybody out. Like, I don't know if your church was like, your church is the only one that's going to heaven. Anybody else, that your group.
That's the way my church was.
Yeah, like anybody else, like they're confused. They don't know if they make it. It's just because they were doing it our way without really knowing that they were doing it our way. Was your church kind of like that? That's why you didn't associate with others?
yeah, well, we had the idea that we kind of had the epitome, I guess you could say, of God's truth. We were, because it was on both fronts, and we heard it preached, like, you have to have Pentecostalism or you don't have the power of God. You don't have the Spirit of God. You don't have the Holy Spirit really in any capacity. That started to, I'm noticing some doctrines are starting to change and slowly become more mainstream and I believe more correct. But the way I was raised is if you don't speak in tongues, you don't have the Holy Spirit, and you might get to heaven without the Holy Spirit, but you're really not going to do anything for God ever. So churches that had standards but didn't have tongues, we saw them as weak, but maybe still saved if they still had the holiness standards, and the holiness standards that represented sanctification. And even though, so there were a couple camps the way they believed about other churches. You had your really strict people and I know these people exist. I've met them. They really believe it's only Holiness Pentecostals. They're the only ones going to heaven.
Met them.
But then,
Yeah, I used to be like that.
Sounds very, very
I used to be one
familiar.
of them. They're similar. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I promise they exist. But then there's the more common view is that there are Christians in the Baptists and the Methodists and the Church of God, but they're saved and they're probably going to heaven if they really love the Lord and they're seeking the Lord. But if they are genuine and they are really praying and reading their Bibles, God is going to lead them into holiness. Like that was almost a promise from a lot of people that if you are really sold out to God, if you're actually sanctified, if you're legit, you're going to get the same exact standards and receive speaking in tongues just like they did. And as recently as, I guess it was 2020 now, into 2020, I was sitting in one of the church services and I heard several people talking in a Sunday school class about how don't you tell me that you prayed and God didn't give you these convictions. If you really prayed, you would have. And if you tell me that, I know you're lying because I know what God told me. Like exactly like that.
Wow.
I was sitting there just like, thanks, guys. Like, thanks. Because, I'm the only non-holiness person, regular attender that's there.
Right.
Uh-huh.
So that was a fun experience.
Oh, I can
them
imagine.
telling me that I lied to them.
Oh.
Wow.
Yeah, but that's a lot of the people I grew up with was this: if you're legit, God will lead you into it. And there are some that understand the idea of Christian liberty and differences, but they tend to be a minority.
Yeah.
Wow.
They're always the not the leaders, they're the ones that are the more followers that end up believing that, because I've found in churches it's easier to be a yes man to the leader than to be the one that actually has a differing of opinion. I've found that. Yeah.
Yeah. This is all sounding so familiar.
It does.
I mean, the only thing that's different in what I remember growing up was there was none of the speaking in tongues. The speaking in tongues.
That's the only difference.
But other than that, it was almost identical to what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yes.
My personal experience with just anybody speaking in tongues, and I've talked to my parents about it, and my dad said, and my dad's going to listen to this, so I want to make sure I get this right, or he's going to be like Missy. But he did say sometimes the Holiness Church does not talk about it because it is not understood. And so we're more willing to go and start talking about other things than, because obviously it is important. Paul wrote about it in the Bible. So if Paul wrote about it, and even did Paul even say that he spoke in tongues?
I honestly don't remember off the top of my head.
I think Paul did.
He
I
did.
remember different. Yeah. So Paul, he said, I think he would wish that they all spoke in tongues like he did. I think that's the verse I'm trying to think in my head. But just because you speak in tongues, I've had different ones say that like you cannot properly pray for your children or your family if you do not speak in tongues. And I remember that just like that hit me like real hard. Ooh, that made me like, I was like, you mean to tell me that my mama, who prays for me like so much during the day, that she cannot touch heaven? Like that upset me. And I just kind of went, I'm done with that. I closed that down very quickly.
That's exactly what we're trying to say. No. So, yeah. Man, let me try that again. On our side of it, of what we saw,
Right.
it was very hostile towards Pentecostal
goodness.
churches.
Yeah.
And so there was that same aspect that you're talking about, Natalie, of that there were those Christians that thought it was us four and no more type of thing. Mm-hmm. And that, there may have been a good Baptist, but when they get light, when they get light on something,
Right.
Yep.
yeah,
Heard that.
then
Heard
they
that.
will show up here dressed like an Amishman.
Like it was, like you're talking Pentecostal was like borderline, like demon possession is what I was.
Oh, they used to rag on it so bad,
Yes.
and then of course, but they ragged on everybody.
Yes.
They ragged on how many times, and the thing was, I don't think any of us knew what they were really talking about. How many times we hear them talking about that's Calvinism? I'm like, oh, that must be bad. and then when I was a kid, and I would hear this, and then I got a little older and met somebody. They're like, I'm a Calvinist. I'm like, did you say Nazi? It's like I had like the same reaction. I'm like, I've heard about you guys. Yeah,
I never thought I'd see one in person.
yeah, I know.
I've read about you in my history book.
One of y'all used to have a funny little mustache. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, okay, our churches were just like that towards Calvinism. Some of them were just like that towards Calvinism. So I can relate.
Yeah.
Yep. Sounds a lot like it. And then for the longest time, I thought that Calvinist and Baptist was like the same thing. Well, then I start listening to some Baptists, mainly IFB preacher clips or something like that, and they start ragging on the Calvinists too. And I'm like, man, you guys cannot catch a break. They're getting it from us. They're getting it from them.
You enjoy that way too much listening to those guys.
Yes. So then you said that. So then, how was it looked at? I think you alluded to it a little bit. The other churches that didn't believe in or that preached against Pentecost, speaking in tongues, stuff like that. I'll get it. I'll remember it when
Back up, give it another go.
Pentecostalism. So were those churches? Was it pretty much the same level of hostility, towards the ones that didn't believe in tongues?
I think probably they were like Holy Ghost haters, for lack of a better term, because we associated tongues and the Holy Spirit so closely. So maybe we would have looked at some of the people that actually preached against tongues as borderline blaspheming the Holy Ghost.
Yep.
But yeah, for the most part, it was about the same towards everyone, except if we ever came across someone who's actually preaching against Pentecostalism, then they're like, that just added to our persecution complex.
You guys had one of those too, huh?
Thank you for that.
You were like, we're suffering over here, but we will bear it.
My uncle, if I'm not mistaken, I've heard him preach about Christians were about to be loaded onto boxcars and took away to concentration camps. And this was like 20 or 30 years ago. And like by that time, boxcars and shipping people on them was completely obsolete.
I don't even know what you're talking about.
He would still get up there and warn about it. Yep, very familiar with the persecution complex too.
Goodness.
So take us through a little bit more of that there. So you, this is what you grew up around then.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a lot of my family involved in the ministry, especially extended family.
So then I know that you'd mentioned about, or I'd read in, I think on your bio or something like that, about going on and going to a Bible college and things like that. Won't you just take us through some of that and how things started to change for you and all that?
And when did God start opening your eyes to that there is a different way? And how did your relationship with the Lord start to change from what you were raised with? And when did it become personal for you? I'm very interested in that.
Yeah, sure. So I initially got saved, made Christianity personal, however we want to phrase that, when I was around 7. And I still remember that pretty vividly. But then after that, I was really excited about witnessing, about winning the world for Jesus. My mom was great homeschooling us, and she read us a lot of missionary bios, and at that point, like, I wanted to be a missionary, also an astronaut, still working on those together.
Those kind of work together. You know, Mr. to the alien.
Fun fact, though, fun fact on the astronaut point, I gave up that dream in part because I realized astronauts can't wear skirts.
I knew it was coming.
Yes.
Oh my goodness.
Yep, same thing here.
That's when missionary won out. So anyway.
Yes.
Very zealous kid. But I have some of this on my bio, so I'll skim over it. But basically, at that point, I really associated witnessing and winning the lost with convincing them they have to dress holiness, which I really shake my head. And of course, I have holiness people that read that part of my story, and they're just like, we don't witness by, telling women they need to start wearing skirts. And, that's usually true, but somehow it got miscommunicated to some of his youth, because I don't believe I was the only one with that misunderstanding.
Oh, yeah.
But anyways, I offended some people in those days.
That idea though is never corrected either. Have you noticed that about the church too? They don't correct it because they're like, oh, we don't want you to say that it's okay for them to look different than what we are right now. Even though it may not be wrong how they're dressed, or it may not be right either, but it's never corrected. Be like, you don't address that.
Right. Because the biggest thing they always hit was be ye set apart.
Oh yeah. Yep.
Right.
Come out from among them and be ye separate, saith the Lord. Oh yeah.
Yep. Exactly.
Yep.
Well, and a lot of times when we saw people come into our churches and start dressing like us, a lot of times there was an assumption that, God was dealing with them and that they had been saved at some point, because otherwise they wouldn't start looking like us. And the same with youth in the pews. A lot of times if they're dressed the part, you just assume they're a good, godly youth. And so it's an unspoken assumption, and I think that's why it gets miscommunicated a lot of times.
Yes.
Yep. Used to see it all. Yeah. We would base somebody's relationship with Christ on how they looked completely.
Well, it also goes along with, because we talked about this before, how to know that your church organization or what you came out of is part of a cult. And one of the questions was, do you have to wear a certain outfit to feel accepted into the group? And that was one of the questions. And I was like, oh, yeah. If your skirt didn't reach a certain place when you sat down, if your sleeves, you raised your arm up, if it went up when you raised your hand, it was too short. If you bent over, and you had it, if you had any gap at all in your collar, it was done. I mean, if you had those little spit curls around your head, that's right. You're trying to look like Jezebel. So many different things.
Curls?
Yeah. I
used to hear them preach.
Yes, they would preach on if you curled your hair at all, and if you had hairspray in your hair to keep those curls, it was wrong. And then if you didn't have enough hairspray, it was also wrong because then you look like a frizz ball. I was a very, very strict church I came out of.
The old frizz ball.
Wow.
Yeah.
You can't be running around here looking like a frizz ball and such.
How dare you look like a frizz ball?
Yeah, a lot of this completely depended on who was, wielding the pulpit.
Different preachers. Preachers always, like you said, Phil, one time there would be one guy saying it was wrong to wear cowboy boots, and another time another one would say it was right to wear cowboy boots. You didn't know what. It was always preaching personal conviction from the pulpit.
So confusing.
Yep.
Very confusing.
So back to the question I was answering. So after that stage in my life, that's when my older brother Nathan, who writes a lot of our articles on the website, he had moved away. He was went to West Point Army, and while he was there, of course, the only church he could go to was their very generic, non-denominational that they had on the military base, and so he couldn't be in the Holiness circle. And during that time, he had really started studying for himself what the Bible teaches about things like, it's abomination to wear women's pants and no jewelry and no makeup, this type of thing. And I was really close to my brother, even though he's several years older. And when he would come home on breaks, we would just talk for hours. And he started to share with me what he was finding as he studied the Bible, as he thought deeper about what we had been taught in Holiness. And initially, as a teenager, I was very upset with his conclusions, very offended, and I felt like he was losing his soul.
Yeah.
I was extremely worried, and I felt like if I couldn't talk him back into believing that women's pants are wrong, then he's gonna backslide. He's gonna marry someone backslidden. Like, I was so concerned. So I started studying. And the long story short is I could not prove my brother wrong, no matter how many Holiness pamphlets and websites and the Holiness handbook, everything I got my hands on and looked through and listened to, and trying to ask questions, which that didn't go over too well. But no matter what, I couldn't prove him wrong. And so eventually it dawned on me, okay, if I can't use the Bible, church history, etc., to show anywhere where his arguments are flawed or erred, then I'm the one in the wrong. So that was really hard to swallow, and I just got to the conclusion that I'm going to stay in Holiness. I'm going to have these differing beliefs about what the Bible teaches, but I'm going to follow every single one of these rules and above and beyond on a lot of them, just in order to basically please the preachers.
Yeah.
Gotta keep your head down.
For lack of
huh?
better word.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I really loved the churches. I saw so much potential. I was so excited about how we could make things better, about how we could start Bible studies and we can teach apologetics and we can start children's outreaches. And I was just teeming with ideas at that point. So I wasn't going to leave Holiness. Like, I had all my connections here. So this was for about 8 years, not quite a decade. I stayed in Holiness all the while believing that basically what was being preached was a lot of personal applications of scripture that were not actually scripture. And as I studied the history, I started to see where they came from. And actually, we've, quote unquote, dropped the standard a lot, because a lot of it originated from the idea that plain dress was basically Amish, Old Order Mennonite.
Yeah.
Right.
That's where it originated. We've just changed and evolved and devolved ever since then.
Right.
So I was just content to stay. Went through Bible school. Really, I guess it was a bit mixed, but overall, I just kept my head in my books and absolutely loved it because I loved theology. I definitely fell out just disagreeing with a few of the things that were taught, but when it was basic like Christian ethics or systematic theology, I love those classes, and I'm still really grateful for my experience there.
Right.
And it was at the last year of Bible school that I started to, I really was concerned because our school, we had some genuinely really good teaching and preaching that were focusing on outreach and ministry. And I mean, passages like Matthew 25 were brought up, which is, clothe the naked and feed the hungry and this kind of thing. And community outreach was talked about, and all these ideas were swirling around, and we had personal evangelism class, all of this. And I just Christianity became so real to me. And I realized, we have an incredible message in the gospel. And as I studied deeper into apologetics and just realizing how much evidence there is for Christianity, how good of a explanation this is for, why we're here and our purpose on earth.
Right.
I just wanted to share that. I was compelled to share. And it started to bug me that at our school, we had so many ministries, we called them, that were sent out every single weekend almost. And we went all over the country, but in the great majority of these ministries, we were just going to other churches, singing, preaching, testifying, trying to encourage other Christians that were in our very particular group, and then, taking a collection just to get enough money to drive back to the school and whatnot.
Yep. Very familiar.
Yep. The conservative Holiness Bible schools do the exact same thing.
I was part of one of those groups.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So
they can only sing at those Holiness churches, though.
Right. Only those
Dare
groups.
go out into the hedges and sing to nobody.
Yeah, how dare you? They got to line up pretty close with your theology.
You're not donating money? Sorry, we're not singing for you.
that started to, as much as I see it as a good thing, because these churches genuinely wanted us, and we would, genuinely, in most cases, take the burden off whoever's working there and help them for a weekend, and sometimes help with chores around the church and this kind of thing. And as much as I appreciated that, and I still think it's a good thing, it was not outreach. 90% of the time, it was not outreach. And it bothered me that we're supposed to be the next generation winning the world to Jesus, and we're not doing almost no evangelism. That started to really eat me, and I could not get it off my mind. So with the help of a few other like-minded students, we really wanted to do a community outreach. And we heard in the old days of the Bible school, there was a lot of community outreach, but we just hadn't done it in I don't think 20 years, honestly. So we got permission. That's a whole other story, trying to get the girls and the guys to be allowed to work together. That was just fun. Cool moment.
Yep.
I'm so appreciative. They broke the long-standing tradition of always keeping guys and girls segregated, and actually let us go out and do a park ministry once, on the weekends. So kudos to all those faculty that allowed that.
Good on them. Yep.
Yeah. So that was good, but that's when I really started thinking something's off about our movement. Just how I don't want to say revolutionary that step. Everyone was just we haven't done this. What are you doing? Kind of reaction from a lot of people. Yeah, and that's when I realized something's off. I went home to the church, one of the churches. I grew up in Alabama, and tried to do another community outreach there. And I had a hard time getting support. There were a couple people that just loved the idea, and I love those people and how they encouraged me. But a lot of the church even there was just kind of, what are you doing? We've never seen this done before. And it ended up being the 12-year-olds who came out with me once a week and tried to share the gospel with the local kids in the park.
Wow.
Yeah, a lot of preteens. I love those kids to this day. They were awesome, but they got it.
Right.
And a lot of the adults were just yeah, we don't really do this.
I just want to clear up here, and maybe it's just me because I'm not understanding, or I'm on cold medicine or what. But when you're talking about outreach, you're talking about reaching out to the masses and not the church people, because you were busy ministering the college to. It was more in reach, because you're preaching to the choir.
Right.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure I understood that, because you were talking about just reaching out just to the general public about Jesus.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, that's exactly what I mean.
Okay, good.
Which to your point is very much, it's very much out of focus in so much of even the conservative holiness movement. How many times, the church I grew up in, how many times you see somebody come in and get saved? How many times did we actually reach out and try to bring people in?
Yeah, exactly.
How many times did you hear a pastor say he hasn't gone calling in anybody in years?
Yeah.
Well, it was at our church anyway, it was just you come to us, we're not coming to you. That was and,
however, you come to us, but don't you dare come as you are.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh. Yeah, I used to hear those church signs preached against, because there'd be Holiness preacher just says, come as you are. Well, they need to add and be changed.
Oh, no.
I heard that preached against too.
Oh. Yes.
Same sermon.
Oh, yeah.
Exactly. I'm sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
Oh, no problem at all. Yeah, I appreciate you clarifying that. Yeah, I mean, reaching people that have never heard the gospel.
Yes.
And I was floored when I was up at the Holiness Bible School. I was just shocked how many ended up, we did a program for kids, ended up getting a bunch of teenagers. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, we had to adjust our puppet show, like, spur of the moment a few times.
Yes.
But talking to those teenagers, I was just shocked how many had no idea, like knew nothing about Christianity whatsoever. Right. Like they never heard of Jesus called Jesus Christ. And they were like a 15-year-old, is Christ his last name? Like they never heard of that.
Oh.
Yeah.
I've
funny and sad at the same time.
That they all even thought it was a cuss word. That's all they knew. Like when they said the name of Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
They're like, are you cussing? You're like, no, that's the name of an actual person.
Yeah. So those kids, they knew nothing about the gospel. And so this is back to kids at the Bible school, around the Bible school. They didn't know anything about the Lord, and they came from the most broken homes. Like, I would just leave those park outreaches and cry because I couldn't fathom what they were going through. I mean, I had girls just opening up to me and telling me about sexual assault at 13 years old, and they had no one else to tell.
Right.
And I couldn't believe it. I was so broken. So even more, that just put the question in my mind, what are we doing as the quote unquote cream of the crop of Christianity?
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. So, and then back to the Alabama outreach at that church, there were some people that got behind it. It, like I starting to repeat myself, a lot of them just didn't get it. And that's really what made me start questioning, what good are all these standards that aren't even biblical doing for us?
Bingo.
When all we do is sit around at our camp meetings and revivals, praying through with the same quote unquote backsliders that prayed last year, all of which grew up in our churches. We're not getting anyone new, and we're not partnering with any other churches or Christian ministries at any level. I'm becoming aware of human trafficking, and I'm becoming aware of just the abortion crisis in America, and how many are suffering, and just the amount of broken homes, and divorce, and addictions that are in our communities. And yeah, sure, we preach against these things in our church services sometimes, but who's actually out there helping these broken people?
Exactly right. That's something that they need to reckon with. And when I say they, I'm talking what you've seen, Natalie, and what we've seen, because it's the same thing. Because the conservative holiness movement sees the same. Like, we'd go to camp meetings. How many years we go to these camp meetings? Yeah. And they would dwindle every single year. Yep. And the only thing we heard was about the good old days when people had the fire and the glory and all this, that. And it was all, they would try to shame us into somehow figuring out whatever it was you were supposed to have.
It was our fault.
Yeah. Yeah. It was always like it. And in the meantime, we saw this, the thing of, some of the same people. And I mean, if they're struggling, that's fine. But they should have been growing. Right. Like, not the individual, I mean, the individuals, well, but I'm talking like the outreach, the camp.
And the sad thing is, I was at one time one of those people that was constantly in the altar because I thought for sure I had sinned because I went and bought cherry chapstick that was colored. Like little things like that. When you're preached against, and you wear an undershirt that has like a lace like rhythm like at the top of it, and it looks like you have your underclothes like being shown for all the world to see. Little things like that. When you're taught how you're supposed to look a certain way, and heaven forbid, and it's not like, like you said, the standards are not biblical. But when you do anything different, you had to go to the altar to confess because you had done wrong. And so you're like, okay, I want to do right. I feel convicted about this because preacher just preached about it, but I didn't feel bad about it before he preached about it. And so you're that constant repenting over and over and over and over again, like that there was never there is power above that. You don't have to be doing that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Okay. And you and Morale have to just jump in there if you got anything that you want to chime in on. But Kanan, how many times have me and you joked about how, we would say, yes, the Bible's very clear, very clear on these things.
Oh,
that a woman is not to cut her hair any at all. It's very clear.
Yes.
And just making little fools out of ourselves.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, the shame was put on you. Like you said, miss. I mean, it was, you had just committed sin if you somehow strayed from their man-made interpretation of Scripture.
Exactly. Yep. And it wasn't like, you had willingly like transgressed. It was just more of okay, well, you did this. Oh, there you gotta go confess. And I'm like, that's not in the Bible. Where are you getting this at? Oh, well, we have these standards that are in place. And I'm like, okay, I understand that. I really do. I know you're trying to save me from falling into hell. I appreciate that. I really do. But how am I supposed to live up to these rules that are constantly changing? Every 4 years, we have a camp, we're having a conference, and you're suddenly like taking the manual out and we're like, well, we need to change this because we're finding out the people are doing this. And then you need to stop wearing your long skirts that reach to the floor because that is now a custom, it's a style now. Mm. And I remember thinking I was wearing long skirts before long skirts were like in. So I like just all the confusion, like no wonder people are ending up in the altar so much.
Yeah.
I'll tell you something, when it comes to that clothing, and they want you to make sure that you have enough on, but then if you have too much, it's a problem.
Yeah, then you're trying to be fashionable.
Layers are bad.
You got that dust running behind you.
Yes. Yeah, remember preaching on that? Oh, I do remember that.
Oh, I forgot about that.
Yeah, because the jean skirt was so long.
The skirt was so long
it was
that
dragging the ground.
Oh,
he was preaching on some women had skirts so short you could see their hubcaps, talk about their knees.
Uh-huh.
And then he also, in the same sermon, was saying that these skirts were so long you could see the dust running behind them.
You just want to stand up and be like, which is it? What do you want?
It's not that simple. It's not that simple.
So you started seeing some issues and so when did this, I'm assuming this all came to a head at some point, right?
Right, it did. And that's so first I did some missionary work abroad, and that was with non-holiness Christians, so that was a step. And some holiness people still supported me, which I appreciated, because I think they might have seen me though as spreading holiness to these other nations, which was not my intent. I was actually going to spread the gospel.
Right.
Anyway,
how dare you?
Which is two different things. One's right, one's wrong.
I don't know. Maybe they were just excited about gospel. I know there are people like that.
Yeah, that's true. There are good ones in there.
So I've heard.
Anyways, coming back from that, I decided I was going to give holiness one more try, just to really, because I didn't want to throw it out, because and still I don't use that terminology, but that's what the terminology other people use. Don't throw it away and throw out the Bible. And that was never my intent. I didn't want to reject or forsake or these other stronger terms. It's just like, is this where I'm supposed to be going to church? Are these people going to spiritually nourish me? Am I going to grow in the word? Or, and not to go on a tangent about the lack of Bible studies.
Yep.
But just,
Yes.
So I felt very unsupported in holiness. I think that's a good way to say it, in the missions and in the outreach, because so few other people caught the vision. But when I started after the missions work and I started to fellowship other denominations of Christians, I found out they were nothing like what had been painted to me,
right?
In holiness. And honestly, that put a rock in my shoe is when my older brother, who I was really close to, I already mentioned, I'd been so concerned he was backsliding. Well, I visibly, like, really saw a change in his life, in his spiritual life, for the better. And now Nathan's out there participating in ministry. He'd never done that before. He'd never gone out, every week to witness to homeless people before, and, play his guitar in parks in order to help share the gospel. Like, this was not my brother. What happened to my semi-cynical older brother who was always, sitting in the back as a late teenager?
Yeah.
He really changed and started to pray more and do more and study the Bible. And it was so evident in his life that I had to start asking myself, can the Holiness churches that I've been so trying to serve and fellowship, are these going to spiritually nourish me, or am I going to sit in these churches and slowly wither away and all my zeal for the Lord be squelched?
Oh, that's
powerful.
That's a good point.
Yep.
Yeah.
Very good point.
Yeah. So giving Holiness one more try, I went to a church that was called an outreach church. I'd never heard of this, but it was recommended to me by so many Holiness Christians who sort of understood my dilemma, and they're just like, you need to go to this one church where they really do care about outreach. Funny story, the outreach had been started on a traditional, one of our regular Holiness churches, and if I understand it right, don't want to misrepresent it, but if I understand it right, the people going to the Holiness church actually had a problem with the homeless and the lost off the streets coming into their services. And because of that, they had to split off amicably, and start a separate church for the outreach.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's what I heard anyway.
Yeah.
How much more heartless can you get?
Yeah. Yeah, that's
I don't know.
I mean, that seems like something straight out of, like a Bible parable that Jesus would have said. It's
Yes,
I don't understand the lack
Lazarus
of self-awareness.
Was like in Abraham's bosom. Like, I mean, come on, like that's not even Bible. But I know my dad has had personal experiences where he brought in people from the streets, drunks, druggies. And I remember that my dad said that the church actually made faces and said, he stinks, you should not be bringing him up here. And my dad, he took a blanket and he put it down. He said, if this bothers you so much, he said, what does that say about your heart stinking? And my dad would just constantly, my dad has a heart as for missions like no other. He's been hurt by a lot of people, and but he still reaches out to those on the streets. Like, my husband can talk to anybody. And my dad can do the exact same thing. He'll find out the weirdest person you can imagine, and he'll go up to him. He'll be like, hey, do you know who Jesus is? Do you know, what does the Bible say about this? And like, there's a guy, they'll just get into so many deep conversations, but that just goes totally with what we're supposed to be doing. We're supposed to be reaching out to those that, they might reek, they smell vomit. They smell like drugs. They smell like this, that, and another. But you know what? That's what we're supposed to be doing. That breaks my heart.
Yes, it does.
Yeah, so that is what I heard. If there's more to the story, I haven't heard it. Definitely not trying to misrepresent. But
right, sure.
So I joined the outreach church there, and I really enjoyed it. While I was there, everyone was really good to me until I reached a point in my life. I had, I guess the most succinct way to say it is there had been someone in my life a year prior who completely cut me off and basically told me I had thought this person really loved me. And basically what they communicated afterwards is, no, I never loved you. I loved who I thought you were.
Oh.
And of course that cut. And so as a young 20-something, I'm still, rolling this around in my head. And I look around at my life at this outreach church where I'm interning for college, actually, which was a conservative holiness college. Fun fact. Online.
My mom went to the same one, if it's the same one I'm thinking, in Florida.
Probably, yeah. Yep. Yeah. So that was fun. I had a great professor there in counseling at the time. But so I'm doing my internship, and I got to a point where I was really wondering if these authorities that I really looked up to, that I enjoyed, going out to eat with them and their fellowship and their friendship, would all these people love me the same if I was just honest with them and told them that I don't think these holiness standards are in the Bible. I think these are extra biblical, and this is something we shouldn't push on the new converts that we're trying to win to the Lord.
Right.
And I thought they would agree with me, just because when people came to Christ in this outreach, they did not immediately tell them that I saw, you have to wear skirts, or you have to wear, you have to take off your makeup and jewelry. And it was mostly people would change, but they would change kind of through example or social pressure. But I appreciated that, because in some of what I witnessed growing up, there were times when, we actually told people you have to dress this way, or even brought them clothes. Like, hint, hint, show up to church next week in these clothes we just gave you.
By the way, your thing on there about wearing a robe if you come to church wearing pants. Girl, that blew my mind. That blew my mind. I can't believe that.
It's something right along those lines, too, is I'm pretty sure I probably mentioned this in an earlier episode, but at the one church camp we went to, remember that one year that woman was younger, probably mid-20s, had a couple kids with her, was wanting to come to the church camp, and she was unsaved and all that, but she wanted to come and get saved and, get started the right way. And so she showed up to the church camp, and what she had on, jeans and T-shirt. That's what she had.
Right.
And was going to get some skirts from
a friend.
One of her friends that was already on campus. Soon as she got out of the car, one of these older guys from the church, supposed to be the elders of the church, actually run her off of the campground because she wasn't dressed appropriately, and she never came back.
And she even had her children with her. So this is not just, one soul. This is multiple souls that have been affected by this unbiblical standard.
Yeah, we've seen this time and time again, and that's one of the reasons why I think things like this are such an important topic.
Yes.
Because there is and I'm sure, as we'll get into more here in a little bit, there's a boatload of people out there that's been chewed up and spit out by these kind of movements, and they're left completely wounded and tore apart and don't know how to go forward.
Right.
And some of them don't want to.
Right. Right.
Anyways, so I appreciated that we weren't telling people, exactly how they have to look when they show up to church. And because of that, I thought I was on the same page as the other people in this church and the pastors and whatnot. So I thought I was, safe to tell them, just be honest. Hey, here's how I believe. And this is what I think the Bible teaches. And yes, I follow these holiness rules, but I'm doing it to make you happy, not because I believe God requires it.
Right.
But when I had that conversation, the conversation itself, at first, I wasn't sure. It seemed like it started to be received well, but then the immediate reaction was, if you don't believe that God requires women to wear skirts, etc., you don't have holiness in your heart. And at this outreach, we're holiness from our head to our feet, because we have to give holiness to these people we're getting saved. And then it occurred to me, they really are trying to get these people to be holiness. They're just trying in basically a different way from what I had been accustomed to growing up.
Yep.
And the very prompt in the same conversation answer was, if you don't believe it's required, then you have to leave immediately. You can't intern with us anymore. Which I respect that decision. It is their church, and they have their prerogative to make rules that could be hurtful. and turn away laborers.
It's just, it's weird to me to see people, and we see it all the time, but to see people draw such a hardline stance over something that they do not have clear evidence for. Mm-hmm. I mean, they'll say they do, but when they read you the stuff, like we was just joking about, when they say, "Oh, it's very clear," it's not very clear.
It's not.
There's room for debate in that.
Right.
But they'll draw these black or white hardline stances.
Yeah.
But,
right.
Anyways.
Exactly. Yeah. So I was actually living there at the time. So I lost where I was staying. Lost my college internship.
Wow.
Just kind of lost my ministry positions, and then I was asked not to attend the church. So I lost everything just in one conversation.
Wow, they
is
went
what
whole
it felt
hog,
like.
Wow.
They put the pedal to the metal.
It was said like in a semi-nice tone of voice. I wasn't being yelled at or anything, but it was just like, okay, here's how it is then. And I was really shocked because, like I said, I wasn't just about to go out and be a rebel and shave my head or anything like that. I was still happy, and I told them I'm still happy to live these standards. I've been doing it all my life. I want you to know who I really am. Right. And in my head, I'm thinking, because I want to make sure our relationship is genuine and that I can be authentic here. Yeah, I found out I couldn't real quick. So yeah, that was hard. I thought I was going to be living out of my car. I had nowhere to go. My family was about 14 hours away, but I'd been working at a small bookstore and felt like I needed to finish out my 2-week notice there at least. And of course, I'm already like rooted in this new state with my new friends and circles. And I'm just like, to go home, like with my tail between my legs, so to speak, back to my mom, like, hi, I got thrown out. I wasn't looking forward to that. So I thought I was going to be living out of my car. It turned out there was a Baptist women's study that I had visited, never been to their church, but I visited their Bible study just because I was craving a Bible study, and told them about my problem. They were awesome. They were helping me find like total strangers to just take me in, to just be able to stay until I could find somewhere to sleep more permanently. Because of course I don't have money either. I just came, off the mission field, and I've been volunteering for months. Yeah, and it's to make sure I don't say too much publicly. Basically, it just got extremely dramatic after that, and I was just shocked. I mean, I looked on my Facebook one day, and someone had posted on my profile that I had financially swindled this church that I've been volunteering for, and I was just like, what?
Wow.
What? I did what?
Oh my!
Yeah, it was crazy, and it was supposedly anonymous, but because they had someone else post it for them, but I knew exactly who had done it because they mentioned very personal, private details of mine, that things that were true that only these people knew.
Right.
Oh my goodness.
And in order to make their story more legit, and I was just like, whoa. So of course, to me, I didn't know I couldn't confirm which person in the church did this to me. So I had to, I reached out to a few people, and they'd blocked my number and blocked me on social media. So I couldn't even get in touch with them to see, who was saying this stuff about me and starting these rumors about me.
Oh my.
Yeah, and there was more to that, but that's just, I was, at that point, I was just like, yeah, I don't think that Holiness, I'm going to be able to be spiritually nurtured and supported in ministry in these churches.
Yeah.
Well, I tell you, that's the kind of Christians that every sinner wants to be, ain't it?
Oh, that's sad.
And I say that with the most sarcasm I can
poor
muster.
representation.
Right.
Oh my goodness.
Well, what's sad is that they felt to go that low in an attack against you because you were just being honest about what you thought. Now, wouldn't you think, Miss, that the more proper approach to that would be, hey, look, you're misguided. Let's sit down. Let's talk about this. Tell me why you believe the way you do, and let me hear you out. But instead, no, get your stuff.
It's easier.
And you get You get on out of here.
Well,
Town ain't big enough for the both of us.
that's the problem, though, because I personally was also kicked out of Bible college.
Yep.
For different reasons, and I will testify. I did just about most of the things that I've been accused of, but not all of them. I'm not going to go into detail.
Some of them I have not done.
If you've heard of anything, you're free to message me. I will confirm or deny.
You committed to sin and listen to the Oak Ridge Boys. I know that.
I know. This little, Jesus,
was
On the
this
college
little lie of
campus,
mine
no
with
less.
the Oak Ridge Boys was going to send me to hell. Yes.
And that devilish music.
And that cherry chapstick.
That you
Yep.
kicked out of
And that
seminary.
worldly beard.
Oh, and
Yeah,
then the
man.
Flight 93 movie. Yes, that
Yep.
did happen too. Yep, I will testify to that. Anyways, so if personally, I was told basically that because I was such a rebel that there was no hope for me, and I was to go home before I was finished with all my classes and everything. They knew that my dad was traveling to a revival close by, and says, "Your dad is going to be so at such and such a place. Go ahead and go meet up with him there, and we'll take it from. Don't worry about the rest of your bill. You're done here." So I know a little bit about being kicked out. It is the roughest thing to be told that basically your parents have been like marked for, their entire religious, church career, because their choices have made their daughter do this. I was a product of their choices. And it wasn't like I was my own person. I was 18 years old. I knew exactly what I was doing. I knew when I checked out that book, the Flight 93, the movie at the library, I knew exactly what I was doing. I was catching up on all the awful things that happened to me when I was 10 years old and listening to my mom scream about the planes. I mean, I wanted to learn. And it's, instead of, directing us, like Phil just said, for you, like instead of trying to guide, it turned into the whole, you're viewed as a threat. We don't want to take the time to correct you because you know better and you're not going to listen to us anyways. So bye.
Yeah.
And see, we, as far as I know, we was never legitimately kicked out of a church, but we were basically blackballed out of the one church that I think we grew up the longest in, because they never would offer, to make us members of the church, because for some reason they claimed that our family was a bunch of troublemakers. I mean, never would we ever be that way. Not
those
the Sparks
troublemakers.
clan. But so they wouldn't make us members, and kind of having a dispute over the pastor, not agreeing with the reasons why they were, dismissing him from his position and that kind of thing. And I can remember we sat at the back talking, and our mom asked, said, well, because we're a member, does it, I just feel like that you guys think our opinion doesn't matter. And they literally said that was the case.
Yeah.
That because we're not members, it didn't matter what we said, they wasn't going to take it into account.
Yeah. It didn't matter.
Even though we'd attended that church for 5-6 years
And
or
you
better.
tied to that church. Like you did everything to that church. You supported that church.
But they also wouldn't offer to make you members?
No, they
Nope.
they said we was troublemakers for some reason. I mean, and that's not even trying to be comical, but that's literally what they said.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it's like we're not going to make you members, but even though you're not a member, then
I think how I heard Mom say it too. She was like, "If you're not a member, you're nothing." Is that how you said it?
All these non-member trash around.
it's
Mom's not saying nothing.
it's now kind of like a joke,
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're not a
we'll
member.
say
You're
stuff.
nothing.
You're not a member.
Here's
it don't
the
matter.
thing, too, that bothers me with this. In all these situations we talked about, there has been no discussion whatsoever. Like, it's just, this is the way it's going to be.
You're right.
You do not have an input.
Our way or the highway.
Yeah. And if you do try to speak up, well, you just want to argue.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And
Right.
stuff like that. And I think the reason for that is, and I know there's people that listen to this that are not going to like it,
Oh yeah.
but their arguments are so weak, they cannot defend them.
Yes.
And then because then it turns into personal attacks on your character.
Yes.
And then
That's
because,
exactly what happened.
yes.
Yep.
And that's what happened to this girl here.
And that's the way it is.
Yep.
Like, with like politics and stuff.
Yep.
You know, you're talking to somebody on the street about it. Whenever they lose the argument, they see their point is no good. They're going to turn to personal attacks and then try to insult you.
Yes.
And that's the same thing that they do in the church. It's crazy.
So what stage then? So this happened to you, and how long after this whole ball got rolling here did you wind up starting the website?
Good question. First, I just want to clarify. I know your audience will know what church in the world I was talking about, but just in case anyone from my side does know what church, I will clarify. I still appreciate what they do, and there are some genuinely great Christians in that church.
Yep.
There are only a few that really went after my character after I left.
Yep.
So
understand completely.
With that caveat, I don't want to lose the few good friendships I do have there. But with that caveat, so I stayed with some strangers, some Baptists for about a week and a half or so, enough to finish out my 2-week notice on my job. And then I just took a car trip because I had a little bit of savings, enough to drive and basically go visit some of my old friends. And so I visited, from all the way down to Florida, up to New York, and then out to Colorado. I think I made like 40 stops, and I was visiting a lot of ministers' homes and having 3-hour, 5-hour discussions with them, trying to figure out, what do I believe? Mm-hmm. And the only thing I was really sure of is basically it really moved me deeply that I'd been trying to please the Holiness movement for some 8 years or so by following all the rules, only for some of those people, as the drama and character attacks spread, to reach out to me and telling me I was a wolf in sheep's clothing, and I'd been deceiving them for all these years because I didn't really believe it was biblical.
Yep.
And so at that point, I'm just like, you know what? If some of the top people in Holiness ministry can't stand me, this is not my place anymore.
Yep.
So, but I still had that zeal to try to do something for an eternal purpose, something bigger than me, and be a part of building God's kingdom in some way. Had no idea what that was going to look like, just because I felt like I just lost my world, and I thought to every other denomination I was going to be a nobody and nothing. Mm-hmm. I didn't even know where to start over, and there was no particular denomination that stood out to me. So I just moved to a state where I'd never been to Colorado. I didn't know a soul in Colorado. I just knew Adventures in Odyssey was based out of Colorado. So I drove to Colorado Springs to try to have the zip code I memorized as a kid.
80995.
I like that.
As every Holiness kid did.
That was about my thought process at that point. So, yeah, I spent 6 months working there. I met my husband during that time, and which now I've gotten married, moved out to the West Coast, and we go to his non-denominational church, evangelical, out here, which has been great. But in the process of, while I was in Colorado, that's when Berean Holiness started. And the short story behind that is I was trying to have my whole world had been holiness up to this point. Like everyone I knew, everyone I loved. And I felt so lonely, and I still wanted to reach out to these people. But for every single person, it's like you feel like you owe them this conversation about, why I have a purity ring on. Because, and there were so many rumors. Like, I had someone I didn't know reach out to me and tell me everyone in his state knew what a rebel and a backslider and church swindler I was.
Oh my!
Oh man!
I had to respond, like, figure something out.
Yeah.
Because I could not continue these very, very emotionally charged conversations.
Yes. So
that's when, talking to my brother, who had been a real support during this time, he was a missionary in Haiti at the time, we decided we would start a website. And he and I would just write out and share our views, what we learned studying the Bible and studying the holiness standards and the history behind them. So we actually took the holiness handbook that I'd been basically raised off of in some ways, and we just dissected it and went through it section by section and refuted the arguments in it, published them online, got to share our stories. And I just wanted to present all these studies and my personal story to my friends and family, so I wouldn't have to continue repeating the same things like a broken record.
Right.
But after doing that, it really blew up really quickly. That's when some of the conservative holiness started finding it, and Oneness Apostolic started finding it, and people that had been going to William Branham's, if you know the Branhamites and the Message cult, it's an actual cult. Anyways.
Yeah, I think I've heard it referenced before. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, yeah. Oh, anyways, very toxic. But they had the similar standards. Ex-Mennonites, Old Order Mennonites, found the website, and I just got floods of messages of all these people saying, we studied our Bibles and we found the same thing that you have. And there's basically two groups. There are the ones that left these churches with so many extra rules, and they grew closer to Christ and grew in their faith and, found mainstream Christianity. And then there were the Christians who just sat under spiritual abuse, because once you, like, quote unquote, defy the church leadership and say you don't see the Bible the same way, even though that should not be seen as rebellion. Right. But once you do that, that's a lot of times when it turns into spiritual abuse in a lot of these churches, and you start to feel the ostracization and the isolation and the manipulation and the pulpit bullying and all this. And so there's this other group that just sits in the spiritual abuse until they're done with Christianity altogether and throw out everything.
Yes.
And I really have a heart for that group, and try to avoid that happening for all those right now that are sitting under just questioning and starting to feel spiritual abuse. So now what the website has turned into is not only studying what holiness really is, but also introducing people to mainstream Christianity and trying to get them into healthy churches.
Yes.
And out of the churches, not that every single church in holiness is like this, but a lot of them turn into spiritual abuse if you ever disagree. And so trying to get people in a place where they won't experience that and they will be able to grow in Christ.
Yes. Yes, indeed. That's a very worthy goal for sure. I know it. You talk about the way, the spiritual abuse, which I think you miss. We know people. I'm talking your whole life cut off, your whole life changed.
Well, it turns into the rug being pulled out from under you, and you're like just falling constantly, that feeling, because everything you were raised around, everything you've known is just gone. It like vanishes. The people you could trust, the people who said they'd be there for you are just gone. My parents have actually had this happen to them, and you talk about floundering. I think my parents actually floundered worse than what I have, because I at least had other friends who were feeling the same thing I was going through. And now that my parents are facing that shunning of where people actually will look directly at my dad and turn and walk the other way. Yeah. And this is by a holiness church that my parents have given everything to. It really just hits my heart. And so I know a lot of what this poor girl Natalie's gone through, because my parents have been facing it worse than what I have.
Yeah, I think
because they have nothing now. They have absolutely nothing. Told not to come back to a church. Yeah.
Me and you did it more gradual, Miss. We kind of, after we got married, we kind of started studying things and all that. And
we started doing our own Bible study.
Not everybody has it that easy. Sometimes it's just bam, and you're out. You're out, gone. Wow. What kind of a response do you get with the website and stuff and everything, being more formal and stuff now? And I see, congratulations, by the way. I saw the view count on one of your posts. It's the stuff's really starting to grow. And but I'm curious, do you catch a lot of flack from people still yet?
Oh yeah.
Did you even need to ask?
I saw the poor one. This poor girl. She posted something, and then like they ripped her apart, and she couldn't even like explain. She said, "Can't I even explain what I did?" And I was reading it, and I lost that post. So if you know which post I'm talking about, send it back to me, because you were like on fire, and I was like, This girl is good, and then it disappeared. So
it's like watching a sporting event. You know, it was great. It's like I want to see somebody do these, these intellectual like Jean-Claude Van Damme moves.
She's Jackie Channing them over there.
Yeah. So your response you was talking about, and you just laughed at me for asking the question.
Well, I thought about a post, and actually, so now first it was my movement was very aware of me, and some of those people really were all up in arms and making posts about me, and it was a circus for a while. I think I'm old news there, which is nice, and most of them have blocked me out, and so calm down. except for the ones that are great. There are some that are great, but now it's moved on to are you guys familiar with Oneness Apostolic and UPC, UPCI?
I've heard the terms just in passing in some of my studies on real hardcore fundamentalism, but I'm not really familiar with it now.
Okay, well they have like they claim, I think just the one organization, the UPCI, I think they claim 27 million. If not the one organization, then Apostolics as a whole. They're an interesting group, Deny the Trinity, but they've become very aware of the existence of Berean Holiness, and some of their ministers have been all up in arms. And I'm looking at a post, and this is the one that popped in my head when you asked, do I still get flack? And there's this apostolic minister talking about calling me out by name on their Facebook, talking about how I befriended many apostolic people, especially women, who are confused or having trouble with holiness issues, because that's what a deceiver does. They hunt for the weak. Under the guise. Yeah.
Watch out. Y'all don't want to hunt for them weak people.
Under the guise to turn them from the faith. That's not my guise. Anyways. And then she's like, though the group says holiness, she's dead set against it. She takes the word and twists it to cause people to doubt and turn from holiness. Not only on this subject, but many, she is perverting the word of God. Be warned, she is not apostolic. She has a vendetta against the apostolic because she grew up in a strict holiness home and didn't want to live it. This deceptive spirit is dangerous, and it's a Jezebel spirit of deception and witchcraft.
There it was, the old Jezebel insult. Yeah.
We always have to bring in Jezebel.
Yeah. You better know them that labor among you. There are many wolves just like sheep. Keep on watching, because snakes always reveal themselves and shed their skin.
Ooh. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Wonder how it really feels.
Sounds like he's a little bitter.
Yeah.
Wow.
I think it's
Like
funny.
she put my name in there.
Ooh, boy. I always think
I was like-
it's really interesting to see guys like that accuse somebody else of twisting scripture.
I was literally just thinking the same thing. I'm like, he's accusing you of the same thing he does every
With their
Sunday.
silver tongues.
And
Their
of course, I'm
silver
generalizing.
tongues. Yes.
But we can tell from the guy's message, about her. We can tell what the guy's like, what he believes, and
Exactly.
that's, I mean,
Wow.
within general reason, of course. But yeah, wow.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Yeah, there was a comment. Someone warned the other ones, like, watch out for her, because she like I play. They were like saying I play dress up on my videos and whatnot. I do because I have a skirt on, and I was cracking up. Them talking about watch out for her. She'll put on a skirt before videos.
Oh, wow.
Has it ever crossed your mind that I actually wear skirts 90% of the time, and maybe that's just something I do, and I'm not trying to deceive you, anyways.
Yeah, that doesn't compute.
I still get some flack.
Yeah.
Just so we're clear, I'm sitting here in leggings.
How dare you?
The tight leggings too that get people in trouble.
You Jezebel, you. It's crazy to me, especially like when somebody makes an attack like that with them and their friends. Then it's like you're guilty until proven innocent. Like then everybody just assumes it, and it's up to you to then say no. I'm not trying to deceive you in a skirt.
Yeah, there's another comment on one of those threads, and I busted out laughing. Someone else pointed it out to me. They were talking about they were praying for Berean holiness and really troubled in their spirit, and the Holy Ghost spoke to them and said, "See thy my dress code."
See thou my dress code?
Do what?
Are you serious?
I'm dead serious. I have the screenshot.
See thy my dress code. Wow.
Well, is it?
Hey, you know what? That's T-shirt material.
Mom's rolling over
That
here.
is T-shirt.
That should be on a T-shirt.
That needs to, yes. Hey, girl, you need to put on a T-shirt. Put that on a T-shirt, and then have like.
Yes.
Yeah,
I love
put your
that.
website name on there, and that is now your slogan.
Yes. Wow.
Oh. Well, hey, Jesus started us off all naked, so our God started us all naked.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, unfortunately, I guess that comes with the territory, huh? When you start kicking them
Absolutely.
into stuff like that.
I
Wow.
appreciate it though. They've even like published mine. I'm sorry, one more story. There was another minister. This was back in November. He made 4 videos, quote unquote, refuting Berean holiness. And I guess in one of his videos, he's just used to talking fast, and he was like trying to get to an airport or something. And I think he's used to recommending like different sites to check out. And so as he talked through the video, he's like, yeah, they're turning people away from the Lord, and they're trying to refute holiness, and they're just backsliding and bitterness. It's Berean holiness. Check them out.
Shout out.
Thank you, sir.
Thank
got a
you.
shout out.
Cha-ching.
You meant to do that. That particular video got deleted afterwards. So. I had a very large spike in web traffic when that video was put out.
I'm
So,
sure.
Yeah, I love my haters. They're great.
What's great too about this kind of stuff is there's so many people looking for this kind of material. I mean, I've Google searched for years trying to find people's stories or takes on things, you know. And then, of course, I found the Recovering Fundamentalist podcast, and then I've really been hooked on that for a while.
You love that.
Well, wasn't our CHM episode like one of the biggest that we've ever put?
Yeah, that was one of the things I was going to mention. Like, we're not a focus on the family podcast, but we do occasional episodes where we'll hit on things,
Right.
And those are always our top episodes because I think we do got some people that like to hate listen, and then
And that's fine. Just hate away, listen away.
get sermon material. You know who you are.
Yes. Yeah.
You know who you
Phil
are.
mentioned to you that we were brought up in a sermon.
Yeah, that was fun. But
Oh yeah.
yeah. But there's people hungry for this kind of stuff. Yeah, and I think what you're doing is a very good thing.
Well, let me put it this way: our name wasn't brought up directly, but it was somebody that was like immediately close.
It's like they tried to play a game. How can I describe Hillbilly Broadcast without saying the name?
Yes. Let's bring up all the topics they talked about and write about how they are just like choosing not to read the Bible and all the things. Yep. Yeah.
They used a direct quote from Canaan too.
Yes.
Oh, that's right, they did.
Oh, Canaan.
Like if you're gonna quote us, at least give us the credit.
Yeah, and I do got to say,
I know, right?
I never thought Canaan would ever get quoted in a sermon.
That's right.
Oh man.
There was a website design created by some holiness people, and I'm so glad I screenshotted their homepage because they've changed it now. I guess they've gotten wiser. But they quoted the Berean holiness vision statement verbatim on their homepage and said, "You will find us on the internet." They just said it's on the internet. And it's not true. And like their website supposedly refuted it. I was cracking up though. And I wanted to email the author and just be like, can you please just link to Berean Holiness?
Yeah.
Quoted us verbatim, but they didn't.
Yeah.
So kind of annoying.
Hatred can increase the traffic. Yeah.
So they posted your mission statement like as what? Like as preaching against it?
No, it was their own.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, their own?
Yeah. Well, they quoted our vision statement / mission statement to say this is bad, and our website shows why this other website is bad. But they didn't call it the other website. They just like the people who say this quote Berean Holiness statement verbatim on the internet. They're bad. This website will refute them. So yeah.
Oh my
Yeah,
goodness.
that's always fun. That's always fun. Kane, Bryce, you guys, what about you on that end? You guys got any questions that you wanted to bring up?
No, I do want to say though, to you, you may have some haters, but a couple of weeks ago, I walked into our church, and the pastor's wife actually came up to me and my wife and was showing us your website, and she really loves it. So you're doing a great thing.
You're trending positively in our church right now.
Yes.
Do you think you're we've got, our church has come such a long ways, and we have really come far away from the radicalness, I guess you could say. And so your post about spiritual abuse, I mean, she has shown it to several of us girls around the church. I actually showed it to a coworker of mine. He was just talking about his brother-in-law, who's just like he's a spiritual abuser. He is. That's just the only word I can think of. And so just bringing light to how we view Christianity outside of the radicalness is it's so refreshing. And it makes me want to grow deeper with God more every day. And just to know that we're not alone is it's so awesome.
So encouraging.
That's all I have. Thank you.
No, it was good.
Yep, that's good. Yeah, there's a lot of people hungry for that information. I mean, I've went through it. So many of my friends, so many people our age, it has went through this phase.
Yes. One of your topics too, Natalie. You said something about like, why are our kids like leaving Christianity? Like, what was that you mentioned? I wanted to talk about that because that was such a good topic. Do you remember which one that was? I think I actually screenshot it. Because I was like, I want to ask this because it was so good about, I think it's the last thing I did. We ask why are youth leaving Christianity. We should ask, did we even teach them Christianity? And that is so true. I can honestly tell you, I only know what I know because of my parents. They poured their heart and souls into me to love Jesus the best I can, love people the best I can. And, if you love your neighbor and you love Jesus, you're doing exactly what God said to do. So I like that. Can you tell me a little bit about that topic there?
Yeah, that partly was hearkening back to the fact that so many churches that have such an emphasis on outward standards, they don't emphasize reasoning and why we believe what we believe. I mean, they barely even touch on it when it comes to standards. It's just like you just do it because the rest of your church does it,
right?
And we don't. Of course, it's understandable why most of them don't dig in and try to make an apologetic for those beliefs. But just like they don't do it for those beliefs, they also don't do it for, why do we believe God exists? And why do we believe that Jesus was a real person? Very few dive into these subjects.
Right.
And because of that, it's all about what the preacher says. It's all about just believing because I said so. Or, of course, they'll say because the Bible said so. But then once these kids get older and the whole because the Bible said so when applied to jewelry, they read the Bible and they're like, oh, wait, the Bible doesn't say that. They feel lied to. They feel duped. And in that time of and then when you ask questions and when you push back, and if you have any kind of disagreement, you're seen as a rebel and, of course, spiritual abuse. And you don't feel like you can talk to anyone. You see a lot of them keep the mentality that all other denominations are worse, which is really sad. Not everyone keeps that mentality, but I know quite a few Holiness kids who have. So they still operate under the assumption that their Holiness church is the cream of the crop in Christianity.
Mm-hmm.
And the cream of the crop treats them like trash because they can't find something in the Bible. And then they lose all trust and respect for their church leaders. And by the way, the only reason they believed in God was because of their church leaders, because they said so.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So their whole faith goes out the window pretty quickly. And then guess what the Holiness people usually do? They say, look, you question makeup and now you're outlost and live in a wicked life.
Mm-hmm.
And they blame it on questioning, makeup.
Yep. Exactly right.
That's exactly right.
They like to do the see, told you so. Yep. And then you become a sermon illustration.
You'll be like that one girl. She went out there and she started off just small, and now she's like, look at her. She's walking around wearing pantsuits.
You know something. You know something that surprised me too was listening to the recovering fundamentalists and hearing with them too how similar that IFB was to Holiness.
Yes.
And I even heard some of the same illustrations. Mm-hmm. He said, and the guys, they mentioned it, like, how many times have we heard the story of these two young people, three young men, they left church early. They go out there and they said, hey, big fella, how far to hell? And he said, 3 miles up the road. And they went up. He said, how many times have we heard that? And I was sitting there, my mouth dropping over. I'm like, I've heard the same thing.
Yep.
Like tons of
But the story never matches either.
No.
It's like different, like so-and-so from this group or that group. And they're all using the same illustration. I'm like, does this happen like multiple times in each group?
Well,
this is scary.
Yeah, and to Natalie's point too, like preachers are looked at, I've said this before, I firmly believe it, they're looked at like he has a special connection with God, therefore he basically has the final authority.
Well, how about this? A friend of mine, and I will not mention any details, but she said that the preacher actually said he was the voice of God. And so everything he said was they're supposed to do. This is also like the same district that went around, and if you didn't have on stockings, the guy would actually rub your leg and see if you were actually wearing stockings.
Ew.
I want that job.
Kanan.
There it is. I knew Kanan wasn't going to be able to keep it.
He couldn't get through that without getting himself in trouble.
But I mean, this is the stuff that I came from. So personally, what I grew up with, it was rough. But there's a lot of stories that I'm not going to go into detail of. But yeah,
I tell you, I've heard that story before from other people about a man going up to a young girl, whether she's, a teenager or an adult, I don't know. But going up to a female and rubbing her ankle to see if she has, pantyhose or whatever on. I'm like, that guy's got a problem.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
And it seems like a lot, and this is just my opinion. You can take it or leave it. I don't care. But it's just my opinion. That it seems like a lot of standards that are specifically towards women, you could just about trace it back to the men having a problem with a woman's body.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And so he implements a new standard so then he doesn't have to control it himself.
I think that's a lot of it.
Because, and this might be, you guys can disagree with me if you don't think this is correct, but because it honestly seems like they try to take away a woman's beauty. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like, you can't wear any makeup, you can't wear no jewelry, you got to wear, long sleeves, keep everything covered. Like you can't see, a woman, being as beautiful as she can be, and it's like I say, it's because it seems to me like they have a problem, but instead of dealing with it themselves, they're going to make you suffer,
I think
so that they don't have to.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of that. And I tell you what, and obviously this is a completely different topic that we don't have time for, but there's a lot of pretty big dark side to a lot of the stuff too, like we talked about with David Eicher and him talking about the problems in the Mennonites, and then the things that we started finding out more and more about Miss. But anyways, Natalie, we've been going for about, well, it looks like about an hour and 40 minutes, so we probably should start wrapping it up. But kind of want to give you the last word there. You know, if you want to plug the website, any last words you want to give to us?
Well, first and foremost, thank you so much for having this conversation with me. It's been a lot of fun and enlightening to learn about other kinds of churches that were so similar, but that we couldn't fellowship because, unfortunately, you know, they probably weren't going to make it either.
Yep.
No.
That's good.
But yes, the website is BereanHoliness.com, and Berean is like from Acts 17:11, I believe it is, where the Bereans were more noble because they searched the scriptures and checked whether or not Paul was telling them the truth about Jesus.
Very good. I wondered where the name came from.
Nice.
It is honorable to check and see whether or not your preacher is telling you the truth according to scripture.
Yes.
So you spell that Berean. We also have Instagram that's blown up recently. That's been a lot of fun. And then Facebook, same name. But yeah, we're trying to study deeper. And if anyone has conservative holiness movement resources on why you guys follow certain standards, I'd love to get more into the conservative holiness side of things and respond to some of those teachings, just because I've had a hard time finding some of you guys' resources. If anyone wants to message them to me, I'd appreciate that. Be able to go look through those and potentially respond to some would be fun.
It's a great idea.
Yeah, it's good.
Well, like you said, they could be hard to find the conservative holiness, because I think they're even more, it depends on who you're talking about, but they can tend to be more strict than even most fundamentalists.
Yeah.
You know, there's not much stuff put on the internet about them.
Well, that's what I was going to say. They're more strict on the internet side of things.
They are.
Than like IFB or whatever. So.
Yeah, even the large holiness denominations can be.
And even a lot of, even if you're like looking for the manual of why people believe, why the Holiness Church believes what they believe, I know you can Google like that, because I know that is readily available. And then I do know when it comes to a lot of standards and why people wear what they do, especially when it comes to women, that is more of an unspoken rule that the church is like, they're taught this, so it will not be in the manual.
It's in the manual.
Not a lot of the things, like wearing your jackets 3 times too big.
Oh, that's
while you're at Bible college, so you you look like you're wearing a potato sack. Like little things like that. So and then like your hair, like hairspray on your hair. If your hair is curly, you're supposed to like flatten it down to your head. You know, yeah.
Yeah, we probably,
like a lot of those things.
I'm sure we could probably come up with some stuff to send you over as well, especially
I'm trying to.
We could recommend a couple. That one was that book by E.E. Shellhammer.
E.E. Shellhammer.
I can't even go into it.
Oh,
but
my goodness.
We'll have to send you some of that.
I tell you, this book, if we started talking about it, they would cancel the podcast.
We'd get kicked off.
That would not be
bad. The guy was completely serious, though, is the sad thing.
Yeah.
But,
I try to respond to real documents, but just one example, I was talking about how growing up in church, we were preached slits and skirts were preached against, like even if they were just a few inches, and put that on Instagram, and I had like multiple people reach out to me and tell me, no one would ever preach that. That is not in our churches. You're slandering our churches. This is false accusation. So I'm like, really? So I put a poll on Instagram earlier, and within just an hour or two, over 100 people voted that they'd heard that preached as well.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, I'm not crazy. But that's why I like to respond to their actual documents. And I've had a hard time finding them for the CHM.
Yeah, they can be difficult to find, because there's times I'll even look for certain church manuals or something like that just to look over, and outside of a few of the more what's considered liberal ones, there's not much out there.
Yeah.
Right.
Kay and Mariah, you guys got anything you want to say before we close it out?
No, I think we're good.
Natalie, it's been very enjoyable.
Yeah.
I'm sure I can speak for everybody and say we really liked it. We'd love to do it again sometime if you get the chance.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
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 Yes.
All right. Well, I guess that's it, guys. I don't think I got to say any ads or anything because I got them all in the playout music on.
It's all done.
All right. We'll see y'all next time.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Hillbilly Broadcast. I hope you enjoyed what you heard. If you didn't and you really want to get us back, go to wherever you listen to this podcast and give us a 5-star review. That will drive me personally insane with anger. If you'd like to send us a voice message, you can go to anchor.fm/PhilSparks, where you can also become a supporter of the show if that's something that you're into. If you would like to send us an email, you can send that to hillbillybroadcast@aol.com. That's right. We may or may not still be stuck in the early 2000s. You can also find Hillbilly Broadcast on Facebook, and I am on Twitter @ThePhilSparks. Again, thank you for listening. I love you. The good Lord loves you, and we'll see you next time.